It is 12:30. I want to welcome everyone to Zoom Away Blue Fridays. This program is a series that we call Beyond the Boat. It includes keys to avoiding deep trouble, which we're talking about now. Great topics for advanced and intermediate paddlers and professionals in the industry. We also have 3 steps to kayaking and water equals wellness. In this program, we're really looking to learn from experienced kayakers in the industry and professionals and track pilots to dive into subject matter like risk management, leadership, communication, and seamanship. And so my name is Hans. I'm hailing from the wild, wet coast of British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And today's subject is navigating the cultural gap, lessons learned from 20 years experience on the Pacific Northwest coast. And got a very special guest here with us today. Little housekeeping notes first. Want to just ask everyone to stay muted for the beginning of the show. And at the end of this, we'll be able to unmute for questions and engage. In the meantime, there's a chat box. I invite you to identify right now where you're hailing from, and you'll find that in your control panel if you don't see it. And if we call on you, you're controlling your own mute on and off. So we'll look for additional comments and links in that chat room. So want to acknowledge just some other pilots that are on here. Looks like in this audience right now, we've got folks from Mexico City, Ukula, BC, Adirondacks, New York, the Ottawa Valley, and certainly Track HQ in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. So let's jump right in here and get started. I'm really proud to introduce a special guest here, Kevin Bradshaw. He's a guide, he's an entrepreneur, he's a track pilot. He's had 20 years of pro guiding on the Pacific Northwest coast. He's got more days in the broken group than anyone, and the current tally on that is upwards of 2,000 days. Very respectable. He is the founder and current director of a outfit called Hello Nature that you can find at hellonature.ca. He is also a Paddle Canada Level 2 instructor. He's a Sea Kayak Guides Association BC guide instructor. He's a skills guide, an international paddler, loving to explore the world. And he has worked with school groups. He's worked with tourists from around the world. He's worked with guides as a guide trainer in guide certification from guides from all around the world and all parts as well. And he works really closely with First Nation groups as well in his own backyard. So Kevin, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super honored to be here. It's always strange for me to hear all those credentials, and I'm not one to brag about what I do. So thanks for the intro. I really appreciate that, Hans. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you guys from the Kluathot First Nations territory on the west coast of Vancouver Island. I've lived here for approximately 20 years, just coming up on that anniversary. I've paddled in Clayoquot Sound, Broken Group Islands, Costa Rica, Panama, Central Coast, Haida Gwaii. I try to get somewhere new every year, hopefully. Keep it fresh and keep it real. I spend most of my seasons, pre-seasons now, doing guide training courses like Hans introduced through Skills and the SKG ABC. Last year, I had the honor of being the ED of the SKG ABC as well. I did that for about 10 months. And then, of course, this lovely year started, so I had to downgrade and prioritize life at that point. So I'm really stoked, though, to be part of the tracks team and the pilot program, and looking forward to seeing where we take that and getting people out on the West Coast and paddling, and hopefully paddling some surf later this year. So yeah, at that point, I'll pass it back to you. Well, I guess I'll follow the script here, Dave, or Hans, and
let me ask a question, Kevin. For those folks that are from different parts of the world, we know the West Coast of Vancouver Island in a certain way. Can you describe for our audience just kind of where in the world you're coming from a paddler's perspective? what does that look like? What are the home waters like from that paddler's perspective from your cockpit?
Yeah, ideally, this area has everything for all different skill sets. The town itself derives its name from the traditional name of Yukluthat, which means the place of safe landing. So we definitely have a protected waters within our Euclid Harbor. And then, of course, just over top of the mountain range to the east, we have Barkley Sound, which has a cluster of 100 islands in the middle of it called the Broken Group Islands, the traditional territory of the Seychelles First Nations. Also within Barkley Sound, you have a straight chain island called the Deer Group, which is fantastic for intermediate and advanced paddlers. I know when I first paddled there, I was like a kid in a candy store. It's like every corner you go around, there's a sea arch or a sea cave, and it's just the water's moving. It's not always placid and calm and tranquil and peaceful, but it's more dynamic. Of course, the further you move up, you get a little more protected. Of course, as we move north, we get the beaches between Tofino and Ucluelet within the Pacific Rim National Park and the Taloquiat First Nations territory. And we get to play and surf, ranging from, some days 1 foot to, if you really want to push it, in the wintertime, we do get all the way up to 50. The largest seas I've seen here is 52 feet. So, of course, I was not in my kayak that day. But I have explored surfing 15-foot faces in a longboat. Not a big recommendation on that one either. Did a few cartwheels that day, but and then of course you get all the way up to Tofino, where you get this beautiful harbor with clusters of islands that give you this entranceway into Clayoquot Sound, which is larger island sets, but more exposed water on the west side. Lots of wildlife, a little more rugged than Barkley Sound, as you're a little bit more further remote. But both sounds are absolutely stunning and perfect destinations for paddlers. So.
Yeah, terrific, fantastic. So you run a guide service in this really dynamic area. It's called Hello Nature. Tell us a little bit about the trips and the offerings that you have there, and what sets you apart from other
Hello Nature
operators.
Veg Tours. We originally started about 5 years ago. We run half day, full day, multi-days. Of course, our heart is right with those multi-day trips. We like to build our clients with the other tours so that we can get them out and truly immerse them in the islands. And allow them some time to disconnect from their busy lifestyles, but to connect to nature and to the culture. I think probably one of the biggest bonuses of the Broken Group Islands is a few years ago, there's a major change that happened in the islands, and that was that parks pulled their wardens out of the park and introduced a new program called the Seychelles Beachkeepers Program, which these guys now are the stewards of the park. They come around, do cultural training and teachings in the evenings around campfires. They're making sure that we're all safe. But it's truly created a new connection within the park to that culture, which, of course, within the Broken Group Islands, archaeologically speaking, we're talking about a culture that's lived there for 5,000 years. Of course, they are currently looking for the original village site, which would be underwater at this point, and we'll probably date them around 14,000 years of existence within the islands. Which,
wow.
A couple of years ago, that number came out up in Central Coast, and rewrote history on the West Coast. Prior to these archaeological digs, they didn't believe anybody lived on the coast during glaciations, and now we have evidence that the indigenous population has been here for much longer than we ever thought. So
that's incredible. That's an incredible perspective, and I can hear the passion that you have for that place and for the connection that you have to the land and with the people and the culture and its history. As a guide and as an operator here and an entrepreneur, what really excites you about the future in this industry?
Yeah, for me, I get that excitement from all the guide training courses that I offer through Skills and through the Seakai Guides Alliance. It's inspiring to see all these new paddlers coming into the industry and their passion, their excitement. I love watching new paddlers when they're learning new skill sets and seeing that new connection, that ability to manipulate their boats, especially when you start to get them into edge control. And it's like, wow, this boat spins now versus resisting that water movement. And yeah, they definitely get inspiration from that. I get inspiration from the programs that we've created within our community too, where we work with youth. So we've got a lot of youth programs coming out this year with the rec department, getting even 8 to 12-year-olds on the water. And then we have another one with 12 to 17-year-olds. Last year we started this program, and it's starting to create a paddlers community within our town. Prior to the last 10 years, you didn't see a lot of locals kayaking in the Ucluelet Harbor, and we're starting to see that build, which is truly inspiring. Of course, on a paddler's side, I'm really enjoying watching the transition from and the new development of strokes that is happening. Even when I went for my Paddle Canada level 2, it was like I had to relearn how to paddle. We all got taught this long, low leverage thing for touring to reduce wear and tear, and now we're learning a higher stroke, a more advanced stroke that allows us to paddle with more core and more power, and at a faster speed, which has truly changed my paddling in the last 5 to 10 years. It's allowed me to paddle at a consistent 5-mile-an-hour speed if I need it. Of course, it's not very good for checking out intertidal life, but so you slow down to that other stroke for when you want to cruise and check things out. And
wow.
Yeah,
Terrific.
of course, the other things that inspire me in this local area is just the ability to get out and disconnect from my life. I don't live a very fast life in Ucluelet, but we do. I still enjoy getting out and disconnecting, especially this year. It's so important. I've paddled the Ucluelet Harbor probably a billion times. And definitely throughout that, I've lost my passion for it. But this year has regained that passion just due to the fact that going out to the water, and it was just always inspiring just to be able to sit there and hear quiet and hear the wildlife and to disconnect, like I said, and reconnect to something more important. Especially this year with a lot of cultural training that I've learned. The university within the First Nations community is not a building. It is the forest, and it is the sea. So it's really important to go out and connect to nature and see what you can learn and establish into your life. So
That's terrific, Kevin. I can really tell what you love about coaching and kayaking on a personal level, as a professional level, and the impact that you can make in the world through that. I really would love to dive into, all these nuances about strokes and the evolution of strokes. Today, I'd like to focus on something that you've just mentioned that is in your wheelhouse and that you're a student of, as we all are lifelong students in seamanship. But in this particular episode, let's unpack this idea of navigating the cultural gaps that exist as we move out in the world. You've identified that we can really draw from some lessons you've learned for 20 years experience on the Pacific Northwest coast that really are transferable to all of us as we move through the world and every part of it. And so in that spirit, I just want to touch base with you. Why is that so important?
Yeah, for me, it's always been important. I grew up in a family of ESL teachers, so multiculturalism has always been a part of my life. As a parent, I think my proudest moment is that my kids don't really recognize color, that they meet people and they greet them by who they are and how they treat them. And so it's just further learning. I also feel that this year, more than any, as reconciliation starting to be talked about within the BC area, that it's important to understand how you can give back and how you can support that. I'm no expert within the cultural protocols and laws, but I've opened myself up to learning, and I think that's the biggest key, is that you're open to understanding, learning, and what you can give back to the communities. And the major thing that we can give back is support at this time. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's so such a great fit with the core ideology of track, and that is in the spirit of honoring the origin, is something that we strive for living by and recognizing and looking to have represented in our actions every day in our professional life and in our personal lives. Now. Quick question then. I get the idea of that's important. Help us understand, what are some of the problems if you're not sort of moving into engagements with awareness about cultural gaps that may exist?
Yeah, one thing that comes up to my mind is that Giselle Martin. I'm currently in it's only 4 days. It's originally supposed to be 28-day session of cultural teaching of the Taloquiat, based on a totem pole within their village. That totem pole outlines every protocol within their culture. They have graciously offered anybody on the West Coast this four-day, 3 hours a day training. And Giselle mentioned that when you go to someone's house, you go to the front door and you knock on it. And, for me to hear that, I was like, oh, what does that mean? And it's like, she broke it down for us, obviously. And she's like, well, when you come to my territory, our territory, the best thing you could do is come and talk to us and see how we want you to interact in our territory, and what you can do to better your time within that territory and the relationship with our people. So it's definitely a huge step that anyone can take, and that is to directly contact the Seychelles, or if you're going to go within the broken group, and see what their protocols are for rec paddlers, for commercial paddlers, for whatever level you're paddling at. So
yeah. So the problems could be, I guess, by not really kind of working to close cultural gaps, is that you may not notice anything at all. It sounds like it can be disrespectful and potentially limit access in the future for yourself or other paddlers. What are the opportunities that exist if you can move and navigate the world with more awareness and best practices within navigating cultural gaps?
Well, with any learning, I find that whether it's formal learning or informal, you're always going to better yourself. You're going to better a relationship, which then opens further doors, whether that's more paddling destinations, or it takes you into a different level of learning. Like for me, the first day of class, they recommended at the end, they gave us homework, and it was all about going into nature and learning from the university, and trying to go to one location that you could go back to over and over again, and watch a tree or watch a plant and introduce yourself to that plant to connect to it, and then try and learn lessons from that. So I think we talked about this in the pre-meeting, Hans, where I couldn't get out of my house because there was a massive storm going on for my education. So I stared at the tree in my front yard, and it enlightened me that while the storm was blowing, this tree was bending and letting the wind go past it versus trying to resist it. And for me, that kind of was, oh, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do this year. I'm supposed to bend with it, be flexible, and not try to fight it, and accept where I am and where I'm going. And so you can learn a lot of things. So it's, like I said, it opens up new learning possibilities as well. So.
Terrific. Fantastic. I'm really getting kind of a sense of the big idea here that resonates with me and some of the work that I've done in the past. And, being a guide on moving expeditions, having worked in an extended relation or expeditions I have that often range between 30 days and 90 days, is that we as a group always got to make the decision, coming from all walks of life, that on that expedition we can choose to bring kind of our best self forward and leave whatever kind of cultural norms, whether conscious or unconscious, that didn't serve us anymore behind, and allows us to really create the world we want, and how we interact with people and nature. It's almost like, okay, blank slate, leave everything else preconceived behind, and what would you lead with in that instance?
I always love that when I travel, because you kind of get to recreate yourself in your best image, and you can leave those negative pockets back home. So in this situation, I feel like for myself, I don't know, it's hard. I feel like I'm still in the middle of school, and I haven't finished the curriculum yet, and I don't know where it's going to lead yet. But it's definitely calmed me. It's created a deeper connection, not only to the Indigenous population, but it's created a deeper connection to nature for me as well, which I can then pass on and hopefully create that connection for my guests as well, or for visitors to the local area. As we all paddle within different locations, we all connect to nature. I think we use the vessel that we paddle to not only keep in shape, but it's a vessel for me to get to those locations so that I can get away from the city or get away from my fast life. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, I totally get that. It's fantastic. I think we're on the on just the edge here, and I love how you've really presented this as a lifelong practice for you. And we're all just students of this at any moment, all the time. What I'd love to do before we dive into kind of some of the kind of 4 keys to navigating cultural gaps you've identified, I'd love for folks that are on the call here to drop in the chat room, just identify just briefly, what are some of the cultural gaps that you're looking to bridge, or that you encounter as a guide or a professional or just paddling with peers? What are some of those, so that we can kind of put that into context here as we think about some of the keys to navigating cultural gaps, and we learned from Kevin on this topic. So, Kevin, in our earlier meeting, you kind of identified 4 key things that are really valuable. Let's unpack those one by one. What's the first thing that you think about when you imagine navigating cultural gaps that may exist?
Yeah, the first thing is always just being open to learning. So one of the don't come in with your prejudgments or what you're going to take out of it. Also, more come into it with what you're going to give back to it, which is it's an interesting mindset when you change that. I'm not trying to get anything out of this program. I'm trying to be a part of it and give back to it. So another major one that I really have taken to heart was that Kelly from Port Alberni was like, when you listen, you should be listening with your whole body. So you should be fully present. And her line was, you should be listening even with your liver or your stomach. And part of that was that within the culture, the Toloquia culture, they believe that while you're learning, you should be eating and drinking, so that part of that is taking the information within you as well and absorbing it in a different way. And then, of course, reflecting on what you've learned and is very, very important as well.
Great. That's so important. I love how you've kind of packaged that into some things that we can really embrace. Having that orientation to nature, like you've just described with the tree, as having a place for continuity, that you can come back to this tree, and by what you see over time is a learning opportunity, and that in no sense is like, can you compartmentalize it and identify it in one snapshot? You've got to study it for a period of time to really have a deeper understanding. Listening with your whole body is really crucial. That's so much. That sounds to me like just a step way beyond active listening, where it's embodied in a way with your whole liver. And I love the reference you've talked about how to actually ritualize that learning process by actually imagining taking food or drink, as you're ingesting information as like a tangible way to really bring that in, and then having a selfless approach and making sure that you account time for reflecting is an incredible hit list for ways to actually practice being open to learning.
Yeah, it was interesting after the first course. I obviously must have been listening with my whole body because even while I was sleeping, I was processing the information that I was learning, which was an interesting. I didn't know that you as humans or as we are, that we'd be still processing or anything while we're dreaming and stuff like that. Usually for me, that's my shutdown time. I feel like I'm just nothing happens and you wake up the next day. But to have that reality or realization, I should say, it's interesting that you can still process and absorb information even while you're unconscious.
Any tips that you would offer in terms of how to listen with your whole body?
I definitely, what I've done in the past is before I even get in the meeting, I try to be there early so I can take the time to calm myself down or to let go of anything that's in my outside world so that I'm currently focused only on what's in front of me.
Right.
Also, other things that not that I've personally done, but things that I've reflected from these cultural trainings is it's a different way of communicating. So being able to pause and form your speech. Also, where was I going with that? So pausing and I lost my train of thought there, Hans.
Yeah, sounds like allowing space that promotes active listening with your whole body. That it sounds like what you're suggesting is that if you're running on and there aren't natural breaks or rhythmic nature to it, then it's hard to really have those things isolated enough to more effectively process them when you're sleeping or later.
Yeah, and part of that as well is that, not only should you be actively listening, but you wait for those pauses. You make sure that the person in front of you has finished their talks, giving them that. So like, I appreciate that you did that. So, and then the other really interesting, and I'm trying to adapt this into my life. I haven't learned it fully, but within the colloquial culture, when you're in a group discussion, it's always one person talking, but then when you start your talk, you always give gratitude to the person that talked before you. And then when you're about to finish your conversation, you give gratitude to the person who's going to talk. So it was an interesting, I don't find it in a North American culture that we do that we give gratitude to our friends or our family a lot through conversation. And this was happening with every single person. It's just like the positivity that comes out of that conversation. It just changes the feeling of the conversation because we're always talking positively. There's no negative impact.
When you say that, I envision just like a thread, like continuity, right? And I can imagine that like continuity going back 14,000 years, how powerful that is, as a force. Really fantastic. So the next big thing after being open to learning, you identified, I think, as focus on giving back. You'd already mentioned that a little bit. Help us understand how we can do that, focus on giving back in a way that opens up that cultural awareness.
Yeah, I feel obviously the first step is to connect with the First Nations within any territory you're going to be paddling in. So just give them a ring or send them an email. They may or may not answer your email, but you've done the first step. You've connected. Maybe go visit their website, find out what protocols they have, maybe what islands they would appreciate that you don't visit. I know that within Clayoquot Sound, when we visit there, our LNT practices change. There's certain islands that we don't go to, but there's also certain islands that say, like a lot of places we dig a hole and we go to the bathroom, whereas on Whaler Island, this island is beautiful. It's in the middle of the Pacific, and you think you would just go to the bathroom and the tide would take it away. But then you have that realization after talking to the Howsit that that beach is actually their clam bed.
Mm.
So you're going to the bathroom on their food source. And
Hmm.
so when you start to realize that there's certain areas that not only are they done for cultural practices or had ancient villages on, or maybe a fish trap on, but they're food sources. So that changes how you behave on that island, or maybe it limits how much time you spend on that island as well.
Yeah, so part of giving back is just also knowing your limits, knowing the regulations, really focusing on L&T in a broader sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, as far as our company, obviously we've gone to a next level. We have connected with the New Channel within the territories on the West Coast. And
yeah.
we've offered mentorship, so we're going to help promote guides within the culture, and we're working with the Seychelles to try and build an industry as something. They see kayaking obviously as an industry out here. They would like to be a part of that. Currently, there's not many members within their nation that are kayak guides, so we'll promote membership. I'm going to work with Skills and the New Channel Tribal Council to build a program to build guides up through that, and then hopefully develop a guide trainer within their culture that can then take that all over and promote within their own culture as well, and build within their own culture. Other things that we've done in the past and continue to do right now is within the Taloquit area. They now have a stamp called Taloquit Tribal Park Allies. So our company has been an ally since the beginning. And what that means to us is that we either give a day use service fee to them, or if we were operating there full time, it would be 1% of our business would go to the nation to help promote stewardship, promote education, and also to continue to build culture within theirs, to reestablish that culture that has unfortunately been lost.
Terrific. Fantastic. That's something it sounds like we could all do in our own local communities, is just find ways to do that, to provide that type of mentorship, to support local efforts, to sponsor organizations that maintain access, to really know your limits and help promote those limits and education for others. Really fantastic. It's great to see Hello Nature really, my perception is at this point, they're really leading the charge on that in many ways, and really embracing that to role model that to other outfitters and other tourist organizations that occupy that really precious piece of land.
Yeah, there's definitely other organizations that are stepping up right now. We're seeing it. There's definitely a movement on the West Coast. What we've realized is, unfortunately, the Canadian and British Columbia government are not at the table right now for reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
They are trying in certain areas, but the business owners are trying to step up and start that process. So we obviously are visitors within the territory, so we want to respect that and build that relationship. So that's been a huge one too, is that reaching out to different nations and just asking how that relationship, how they want that relationship to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not nothing has to change, and they appreciate it, or maybe they have small little points that they want paddlers to follow. So
Yeah, back to being open to learning more.
yeah.
So we've identified being open to learning. We focus on giving back. What's one of the other kind of key elements that you would suggest for someone to really be able to embody greater cultural awareness and navigating cultural gaps?
Ideally, like, yeah, it's really truly is just being open and understand and for understanding. Don't come in with judgment or anything like that, but you can formalize. Like when I'm in a formal meeting, I have a totally different greeting that I do. So at the beginning, we always do introductions around tables, and for me, the cultural greeting is hello or Ukshlama, Kevin Bradshaw. I'm coming from the Yuthuthot First Nations territory. I was born and raised in Alberta, Edmonton, which was the Cree Nations. I then was raised in White Rock, South Surrey, within the Semiahmoo Nations by my parents, Carol Davis and Mark Angarelli. I identify as he, him, and I appreciate being here right now. And thank you for taking the time to listen to me. So it's not just an introduction, it's a little bit of my history. It allows, once everyone has done their introduction, we all have little tidbits about each other that we now know, which then creates a broader conversation eventually. Because you already know that I came from Edmonton, I was raised in White Rock, South Surrey. Those are easy conversation jump off points. So.
Cool. So in many ways, it really, the introduction can also help to construct a web that allows relationships to deepen.
For sure. Yeah. It also acknowledges your heritage and the territories that you not just are in right now, but where you've come from. So that was a big one for me. I actually had to go and teach myself that after the first class. I didn't know, like I knew I grew up I was born in Edmonton, but I didn't know whose nation that was. So it was eye-opening. It was really cool to learn that there was 5 different nations actually that traditionally lived on what now is known as Edmonton. And of course, where I was born in Edmonton was within Cree Nation, and then also reconnecting with, like, although I'd have connected with the Semiahmoo First Nations in the past, I've been part of potlatches down there and canoe journeys, and but to reconnect with that nation as well through the story as well. So I also feel it's important to know where you came from, but also where you're going to. So.
Great. Awesome. So formalizing the greeting in that context that really speaks to the heritage and where you're going as context as to how you're going to engage. Fantastic. So that's 3 kind of key points. What else would you offer?
Yeah, I think I've kind of beaten this one through, but just be open-minded to different beliefs. So within the First Nations culture here, they have a saying called Ishuk Ishsoak. I believe this is not the past. I believe this is the future. And to translate that into English, it means everything is one and everything is connected. My kids come home from school, they get cultural training in school from Giselle and Simca Martin. And they come home with this knowledge. They understand that tree is important to us, that it promotes or builds oxygen, that it connects the different flora and fauna within the forest. They know that then feeds a bear, then also feeds the salmon, and it feeds the ocean. They see that connection, and it's evident on the West Coast here because we can see the decline of certain things, but we can also see how efforts to reestablish are exponential. They grow. It's not just, we reestablished a salmon spawn, but we reestablished that, then fed the bear, that then fed other animals, and it creates a stronger ecosystem all around. And we are part of that ecosystem as well. So
everything is one, everything is connected. Great. Fantastic. Let me ask you this question, Kevin. What are your, thank you for those really concise points on ways that we can better navigate cultural gaps here in the Pacific Northwest, that we could sort of take into the world as global travelers in our kayaking space. What are some of your ideas on, how to teach and coach cultural awareness and these best practices when you're either navigating cultural gaps as a guide or even with peer groups? How do you help guides that you teach better work with these principles?
Yeah, I have to admit, when I was younger, I was maybe ignorant of these principles and practices as well. I think the most important thing is just to talk about it, so that it's out there. that it starts that awareness. Like I said, I'm not an expert in cultural practices, but this conversation might spark something within each one of you, and you might go ask somebody else, and that's going to create a deeper level of understanding eventually. So it's really just trying to break down the wall and try and get the conversation started.
Yeah, terrific. Well, you've definitely painted a picture of a kayaking experience. If you come to Hello Nature and you cool it and you paddle in these waters that is so much bigger than the sea state, and then your current paddling stroke, your capabilities, or your skills progression. And it sounds like there's such a rich cultural component just in the presence with that coming to work with Hello Nature. I'd like to add in the chat room right now just a link to hellonature.ca, which is your website. Folks can come visit that. They can see what your offerings are. You're currently open and operating all summer in full swing. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, partially we are definitely open to visitors that are here. Currently, our town has a high level of fear of tourism right now, so we're trying to not market too much for that. Obviously, people are still traveling. So if they are, I'll take Batak Bonnie's message of be kind, caring, and understanding, and take them kayaking and help them disconnect. Mm-hmm. We are hoping that the season will get fully back into swing and here, and we'll all be sweating and running hard by June or July, and ready to take everyone out to the Broken Group Islands. I did want to just backtrack. Something came to me as well about trying to, before you go to an area and what you need to learn, is maybe just learn about some of the archaeological sites that you might be engaging with. I know within the Broken Group Islands, I see it all the time. It's no fault of the person that's doing it, but they may not know what they're walking on. So all of a sudden they're sitting on this pile of rock having lunch, and it's great and a beautiful view and the seal's coming up, and they're having tranquility and peace. But they don't realize that they're sitting on a 600 to 1,000-year-old fish trap, and that every step that they take moves a rock that hasn't been moved in 600 years. Or maybe they decided to have a fire and they dug a hole above the high tide, and they didn't realize that black soil with shells in it was a midden, which is an organic compost bin. And the way that archaeologists define years and tell the history of the First Nations. So just a little bit more education on those simple little archaeological sites, and being able to identify those so that you can then walk with less damage and with lighter footprints. So. Terrific.
Thank you for that inclusion. And how important it is to take L&T to the cultural level. And for anyone that's on this call or that's listening after the fact, if you haven't paddled in Ucluelet area, I couldn't recommend it more highly. It's completely a treasure for sea kayakers, and it is a bucket list location. So contacting Hello Nature to book a trip and learn more about those offerings is really great. If you can come here, if you can't, I'm going to put a link to the Facebook page for Hello Nature, a good way to stay in touch and do a little armchair tour, if you will, by imagery, as well as your Instagram account for those. And also, want to say, Kevin, we're talking about right now, TRAC has a flagship Pacific Rim Surf Camp that we have run for a number of years near Long Beach on the Waya Point area. And it sounds like there's a possibility for us to work much more closely to that, and your integration into that will be really helpful. So if you want to also come and work with TRAC and learn more from Kevin, you can also do that with the Pacific Rim Surf Camp coming up in September. So I'm going to put that link in the chat as well. as another way you can participate. Now, Kevin, you included a couple of or one other resource that in our conversation, which is the Tribal Parks Alliance.
Yeah, it's just a great resource to go and learn of some of the processes and that you can do and how you connect with the First Nations here locally and what they're doing to create that better partnership and understanding as well.
Terrific. One of the things that I loved about that website is when you go into it, there is an opportunity to make a pledge, if you will. That's a really great intention setting piece before you even sort of engage in other details. And I love that about that cultural approach is like, hey, if you want to explore, guidelines or rules or whatever, let's start with an intention and get clear on that before we kind of get into particulars, because often if you just touch base with the intention part of it, the rest is just details.
Sure. Yeah, you'll find that similar programs will be launching on the west coast of Vancouver Island this year in all different New Channel territories. So nothing else is formalized yet, but I've definitely been talking with different nations on these similar programs that they're all voluntary fees and stuff like that. But like you said, it's a good better use a word is pledge. So. Mm-hmm.
Great. Fantastic. Kevin, in closing, what additional comments do you have for this? And I invite everyone on the audience here to, if you have questions for Kevin, you can put them in the chat room right now, or you can simply open up your mic and we can have a conversation with Kevin about ways to navigate cultural gaps in your paddling scenarios, either with as a professional or with your peers.